Frank Schubert. Good day, Dr. Krall. My name is Frank Schubert. I work as a therapeutic caregiver and using the game theoretical iterated prisoner's dilemma. I have been able to demonstrate in an easily understandable way that we do not need a Leviathan to primarily help each other. In the long run, mutual aid benefits everyone the most. Aid can also be understood as a form of performance provision. One can also say of every product, as well as of services, that it can be useful in helping customers. If someone reciprocates such help, we have mutual aid. The recipient can give money in return. That is your view, and is now often the reality. At the same time, I observed that for the vast majority of human evolution, there was no money at all. The other, as is still the case with non-human animals, gives something back, for example, food or useful social behavior. If nothing is given in return, the help is not reciprocal, and the helper may possibly not be as friendly in the next interaction. Thus, a predominantly cooperative interaction naturally develops. Now we have money, and with it come new problems. Money can, for example, increase through interest, unearned income. When someone receives something without contributing anything, there is no incentive to perform, let alone to drive innovative progress. This applies to exploiters of the welfare system. Here, I also see a problem. In order to truly help those in need, we must ensure that the welfare system is not abused. People who require help through no fault of their own definitely need assistance, which is provided by therapeutic caregivers like myself. Dr. Krall, I am pleased that you agree that help is necessary here, and I concur that only a small percentage of our fellow human beings are in genuine need. At the same time, I believe that people should only be wealthy as a result of true performance that is valuable to others. In this regard, money is problematic, if only because it enables unearned income. Of course, one can also become wealthier without performance through authoritarian measures, and like you, I am opposed to freedom-depriving authority. Dr. Markus Krall. Good day, Mr. Schubert. Your explanations succinctly encapsulate the principle of voluntary, performance-based assistance, a point I repeatedly emphasize in my article. Indeed, the iterated prisoner's dilemma shows that cooperation and mutual aid work in a system where exchange is determined not by an all-powerful Leviathan, but by voluntary interactions and clear performance incentives. Over long evolutionary periods, humans have proven that, based on direct reciprocity and familial bonds, without money serving as an intermediary medium of exchange, they can cooperate exceedingly well. However, we must acknowledge that money as a universal medium of exchange in our modern society undeniably facilitates exchange on the one hand, but on the other hand, it also brings problems. As you correctly point out, interest and transfer payments can lead to the accumulation of wealth that is not tied to genuine performance. This undermines the incentive to be innovative and to actively participate in the free market, precisely the point at which the promise of the free market economy falls into a paradoxical trap. My conviction is that true social justice is not achieved through state redistribution, but through performance justice. Whoever provides genuine added value to others should be appropriately rewarded. Only in this way does the market remain a motor for progress and innovation, and voluntary mutual assistance, whether within the family or in economic exchange, can flourish unimpeded. I greatly appreciate your contribution, as it underlines that it is not about an all-encompassing welfare state, but about a structured framework in which individual responsibility and voluntary assistance secure social cohesion. This raises the central question: how can we prevent the abuse of the welfare system without stifling the free market and individual initiative? What do you think? How can we best manage this balancing act in a modern state between necessary social security and the maintenance of a performance-oriented dynamic market? Frank Schubert, by ensuring that social security is only used by those who truly need it, and not by those who seek to enrich themselves at the expense of those genuinely in need and honest performance providers, we can prevent abuse. At the same time, it makes sense to ensure that people who have more do not misuse their position to disadvantage their competitors. When someone offers something better, demand for their products increases, then their wealth grows, rightly so in my view, since they also contribute to the prosperity of those for whom their help is so valuable. However, there are tactics that wealthy individuals can employ which can override the power of the invisible hand of the market. Dr. Markus Krall. I see it exactly the same way, Mr. Schubert. It is indeed essential to consistently prevent the abuse of state transfer payments. When people who wish to enrich themselves out of selfish motives freely avail themselves of state funds, not only is the solidarity-based system undermined, but the willingness to provide genuine, voluntary performance and assistance is also eroded. In doing so, the state, as I always emphasize, should not act as an omnipotent welfare apparatus, but only intervene where those in genuine need through no fault of their own are truly suffering. At the same time, we must not allow the wealthy to distort free competition through unfair tactics. The invisible hand functions only if the market can operate unhindered, and all actors are rewarded according to their performance capabilities. Do you have any concrete ideas on how, in a modern constitutional state, we can effectively curb such tactics without stifling the dynamic exchange of the market? Frank Schubert, I am considering that. It is perfectly acceptable to make offers from which one can freely choose the one that appeals the most. However, there are also additional factors that, in effect, override the system of the invisible hand, such as structural inequalities that have nothing to do with performance-related inequality. Such differences in performance capacity or willingness do exist, I would never deny that, and I do believe that performance should indeed be rewarded. Dr. Markus Krall, I see it very similarly, Mr. Schubert. It is true that structural inequalities, those differences that are not due to individual performance or the willingness to perform, can disrupt the system of the invisible hand. The market functions best when voluntary exchange and a readiness to perform set the pace. The challenge lies in clearly distinguishing between genuine, performance-related inequality, which forms the natural incentive to be innovative and committed, and structural inequality, which is not based on personal initiative, but often results from political misincentives and excessive state intervention. My position is clear. The state should limit itself to what is absolutely necessary, namely to help only where there is unearned need, and otherwise allow the free market mechanism to operate unhindered. The aim is to strengthen the societal foundation, for example, through the promotion of the family and educational reforms, rather than through broad-based redistribution that ultimately undermines the incentive to perform. In this way, we preserve the natural dynamic whereby people who create genuine added value through their offerings are appropriately rewarded. Thus, the invisible hand remains not merely an abstract principle, but a functioning engine for progress and prosperity, entirely in the spirit of free voluntary assistance. How do you think we could concretely proceed to address those structural inequalities without impairing the free market and the natural reciprocity among people? Frank Schubert, furthermore, I agree that no state should provide incentives for the abuse of the welfare system. I do not see the structural inequalities on the wealthy side as purely state-induced. In part, the state has even actively tried to counteract them. Dr. Markus Krall, that is a central point, Mr. Schubert. The state must under no circumstances set incentives that enable the abuse of the welfare system. Moreover, it is indisputable that structural inequalities, especially on the side of the wealthy, do not arise solely from state interventions. Rather, they also reflect differences in individual capacities, personal preferences, and the dynamics of a functioning market. If the state attempts to level these natural differences, for example, through excessive redistribution or overly progressive tax rates, it risks distorting healthy competition and thereby undermining the incentive for genuine performance. It can indeed happen that state measures, although intended at first glance to serve a principle of justice, actually weaken performance incentives and promote counterproductive behavior. As you point out, there have been attempts to counteract structural inequalities, but often these efforts have hindered the free market mechanism and ultimately caused more harm than good. Ultimately, we should focus on promoting voluntary, performance-based assistance and leave the state only with what is absolutely necessary to address unearned need, without stifling the natural dynamics of the market economy. What do you think? What concrete measures could help master this narrow line between necessary social security and the preservation of performance incentives? Frank Schubert, by carefully examining who is truly in need of help and who on the wealthy side uses their dominance to advance, building freedom-depriving authority without proving themselves solely through performance. Dr. Markus Krall, exactly, Mr. Schubert. It is a matter of clearly distinguishing. On one hand, we must support those who fall into hardship through no fault of their own. Genuine need, as demonstrated even in the evolutionarily tight-knit family unit. On the other hand, we must not allow actors on the wealthy side to secure their position through dominance and abuse of power by misusing state support mechanisms to further undeserved enrichment. A constitutional state guided by the principles of a free market and performance justice must ensure that state assistance is deployed only where it is genuinely needed. The state should not function as a global welfare system, but only intervene where individual initiative fails and genuine need is present. This ensures that the mechanism of voluntary, performance-based assistance and the market as the engine of progress is preserved. What do you think, Mr. Schubert? How can we concretely ensure that this distinction is clearly reflected in the practical design of state measures? Frank Schubert, minimizing the abuse of the welfare system is easier than preventing actors on the wealthy side from securing their position through dominance and abuse of power. Dr. Markus Krall. Exactly, Mr. Schubert, that is the crux of the problem. It is relatively easy to curb the abuse of state transfer payments because clear criteria and measurable indicators come into play. In contrast, it is a completely different challenge when wealthy actors secure their position through dominance and abuse of power. Such concentrations of power are deeply embedded in a complex web of economic, political, and social dynamics. The constitutional state must act very precisely and in a disciplined manner here, without undermining the free market mechanism and the natural dynamics of performance justice. It is necessary to prevent unfair competitive advantages without interfering with free exchange and voluntary assistance. What do you think? Which institutional mechanisms could help master this balancing act without endangering the free market? Frank Schubert. I am still pondering this for Germany. There are things we can learn from Switzerland. We can also learn some things from Rojava. Despite extremely adverse conditions, things succeed there, and no one complains about a lack of performance justice. Dr. Markus Krall. That is an interesting thought, Mr. Schubert. Switzerland shows us that subsidiarity and decentralized structures can indeed succeed. Here, the individual and local communities are granted considerable self-responsibility, which leads to an efficient and performance-oriented coexistence. Rojava, on the other hand, demonstrates that even under extremely adverse conditions, people are capable of establishing a self-organized order in which performance and mutual aid are paramount. Of course, the circumstances differ. Rojava is located in a conflict zone, and here survival necessities play a much more immediate role than in a stable constitutional state like Germany. Nevertheless, both examples offer an important lesson. It is not the state that guarantees social cohesion, but the people themselves when they are able to organize their relationships voluntarily and responsibly. The challenge in Germany is to find the balance between necessary state security and the preservation of a dynamic market, in which performance and individual initiative are rewarded. The examples of Switzerland and Rojava can provide us with impulses on how to foster greater individual responsibility and local self-administration, without endangering the constitutional state and the free market economy. Frank Schubert, thank you very much for this interesting conversation. It shows that libertarians from various directions can indeed engage in constructive dialogue. Dr. Markus Krall. Thank you very much, Mr. Schubert. I am pleased that we were able to have a constructive dialogue, an exchange that shows that even within the libertarian school of thought, diverse perspectives are enriching. I am convinced that such conversations help us to view the complex challenges of our society from different angles, while always emphasizing the value of performance and individual responsibility. Stay committed, and here's to further stimulating discussions.